Hi everyone, and welcome to STL Partners' most recent webinar looking at edge computing and its impact on the retail industry. Thanks for joining. Today we will discuss key trends within the retail space and innovative digital use cases that are particularly relevant to the retail industry. The webinar will start with a short presentation, but the majority of the session will be an interactive panel discussion. I will introduce our speakers in just a moment, but first, just to briefly cover off some housekeeping. You should see a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, which can expand or hide using the orange arrow at the top, and that's arrow 1 as labeled here. There is a questions box in the control panel, so please type questions or comments there and we'll go through them during the panel debate. We'll only use your first name so people won't know what you asked. At the moment, all attendees are muted. If you are facing any issues in terms of audio or tech, please feel free to notify us in the chat box. You can also raise your hand using the hand button to get our attention, and that's shown by arrow 2 on the slide. We will send a recording of today's session out after the event, which we would encourage you to share widely with colleagues that might be interested too. We are advised that the best sound quality is through a USB connected headset. If you have problems with sound, please try adjusting your volume settings locally, and if necessary, sign out and sign back in again. If we do get lots of people reporting sound issues, though, we will try and address it on the webinar itself. Without further ado, I will very briefly introduce our speakers. So today we will be hearing from my colleague Dalia. She's a principal consultant at STL Partners and the lead and lifeblood of our edge computing practice here. We have Jaume, the CEO of Diablo, which are a digital signage and data analytics company. We have Aji, Chief Sales and Marketing Officer at Allgo Vision, a video analytics company. And last but not least, Kennedy, AVP of Global Business Solutions at AT&T. At the beginning of the panel discussion, I'll ask these guys to introduce themselves and their companies in a little bit more detail. But for now, it's over to Dalia to introduce the topic with a brief presentation on how edge computing is relevant to the retail sector.
Thanks, Tilly. Hi, everyone. Dalia here. So as Tilly said, really, we just want to sort of, I guess, tee up the discussion with the guys later with just a short brief on, how we're seeing the opportunity around edge computing in the retail space. I think the first thing to bear in mind are, a little bit of the key trends, some of which have been accelerated as a result of the COVID-19 environment. And a lot of them are really about this, as it says here, the convergence between the in-store and the digital experience. The move towards e-commerce and the ability to use data effectively to track customer behavior has resulted in higher customization around the experience. And I guess retailers are now trying to bring that into the store, but vice versa. There are things that people can do in store that they can't do in digital, and so that's another key role for digital technology is bringing that sort of real life experience remotely outside of the store. So as I said, some of these key trends are this now accelerated move towards e-commerce and mobile commerce more and more, which has been driven, even quicker and accelerated as a result of COVID-19. Retail Economics did a survey recently, found that just under 50% of consumers want to avoid physical shopping altogether at the moment. And so, for those retailers who already had a commerce presence, they were in a relatively good position. Clearly, those sales have grown. For those who didn't, there's been a real drive to set that up quite quickly, even though there's this difficult environment. The other thing is, because of this, this sort of so-called decline of the high street and this move towards online has led to a bit of an identity crisis with the in-store, concept. People still need things within the store, but in some cases we're seeing that the retail store is becoming definitely part of this omni-channel, cross-channel experience. Some retailers are, are changing, I guess, the purpose of the store to become more of a point where consumers can browse for things, or you have these, flagship stores with new experiences. For example, in I guess the furniture sector, you can now go to a store, look around, test things out, but you don't actually buy at that point. It's done offline, so it's changing, I guess, that customer journey quite dramatically. And part of that is providing some more, immersive, interesting experiences, and being able to I guess, elongate the time that people spend in the store to maximize revenue, essentially. Another thing that's been happening is this, change around how retailers ensure loyalty of their consumers. And, in the past, it's been a lot about these, loyalty cards, loyalty schemes, and that's changing towards actually the importance of customer experience to dictate loyalty. It's not a, I guess, a kind of, a stamp card process. It's really that consumers deem if they have a good experience online and offline, if it meets expectations, that is going to drive loyalty for them. And that's part of this move towards customization. So because that the ability to ensure loyalty has changed, it's put more emphasis on the need to really maximize and optimize the experience when you have a touch point with the consumer. And part of that is this move towards customization. And, it's kind of, as I said, the what's happened in online commerce and online marketing and things like that, the use of data, being able to track customer behavior more effectively, that's driven this a little bit, creating a more personalized experience, recommendation engines, all that sort of thing. And, it's clearly paying off. There's, this research shows that consumers are likely to pay 20% more for a personalized product than a non-personalized product. The challenge now is that how do you provide that experience within the store itself, and match what the consumer is doing online with what they're doing offline as well. And then the last thing, which is all kind of in the same, I guess, broad bucket of around consumer expectations, management, customer experience. The other, I guess, big expectation now is this need for on demand. So consumers want products that they buy as soon as they buy them, and that's put a lot of pressure on supply chains. It's needed, or it's required retailers to change how they manage that supply chain, increase transparency. And again, in the COVID-19 environment in particular, there are some disruptions. It's more difficult to move things internationally, and that will continue to be the case potentially for the medium term at least. So that's a little bit of what the retail industry is facing. If we then look at the technology that we're talking about today, edge computing, and what it's all about, some of you may have seen this, may know this, but this is our view of what edge computing is, and it's really about bringing the capabilities of cloud computing closer to the end user or the source of the data. And so there's two ways of thinking about this. One is moving potential applications that could live in the cloud or could be hosted from the cloud, and moving them on premises to a sort of on-prem edge compute, or a telco edge compute, or an edge compute in the retail store, which can take various forms and guises. Retail is obviously quite constrained physically, so a lot of the time the edge compute is a kind of like almost a single server, or a very small form factor. And the benefits of edge, of moving it from the cloud closer to that to the end user, or to where the data is created. Part of that is low latency, and being able to provide low latency experiences, reducing that round trip for the application to go from point to point. Also reducing the cost of bandwidth, and this will come up again when we talk through some of the use cases, but for applications that use video, for example, or there's a huge amount of IoT data involved, it can be very costly to transport that to the cloud. Plus, there's also a cost of storing and processing that in the cloud, which can be, as you scale, which can be very expensive too. And then the last, I guess, key factor is this, increasing need to manage data more effectively, to protect the privacy and the confidentiality of consumers, but also, enterprises themselves have their own data security policies, and they are also trying to comply with various jurisdictions, each which they have their own data management, data policy, regulation, and that can become quite difficult to do if you have if you solely rely on the cloud, you may need a more distributed architecture to comply with those various data privacy laws. The other way of looking at it is that you have applications today, some of which are tied to the appliance or to the physical device, or it may be in a sort of more traditional on-premise compute environment. And the reason why you want to move to the edge is that you're actually trying to, as an enterprise, try to access some of the benefits that cloud brings. And so, these applications are living, so quote unquote, at the end device, very close to the premises already today. So they are kind of low latency by nature. There's no way they'll be moving to the cloud. But what they do want is some of that flexibility, scalability that cloud brings. Also, it may be in some cases you want some level of mobility. So obviously, if the application runs on premises, you can't access that easily if you're outside of the premises. So you need some level of mobility. And the other thing is that by using sort of open, more flexible edge compute infrastructure, you can consolidate as an enterprise your various appliances, devices that are running potentially each application separately. And again, in retail, that's particularly beneficial. I've talked about some of these, but just to bring some of those edge benefits into a retail lens, there are some specific things within, the retail sector, within retail enterprises that lend themselves to needing edge compute. So the first thing, because of this increased competition, the move to commerce, there's a need to innovate more rapidly, and it's even things like seasons in retail stores and fashion are much shorter. They're constantly having to innovate, change the experience within the store. So it doesn't make sense to use any kind of dedicated appliance for running software. It really needs to be flexible infrastructure to allow for that, innovative model. The second thing is, there's, again, partly because of the pressure, there's changes on the high street happening all the time. And also, I guess retail is now following demand, with, in much shorter, I guess, time scales. And so there's a growth of temporary shops, pop-up shops, all that kind of thing. And again, you want to scale the IT networking architecture up and down. And so having something that's flexible, that's reusable is beneficial there. This move towards on-demand and the consumer expectations means that you really want sort of the low latency aspect that edge computing can bring. And a few of the other specific things, some of which I've already mentioned around consumer data protection. Some of these are retail sector specific, like the fact that you have such limited space in stores. It's expensive to rent the space for a retail store, and retailers want to maximize it, want to maximize footfall. They don't want to maximize it for various kind of IT infrastructure. And so consolidating that makes sense. And then the last thing is, just like we've seen in other industries, each retail company has various legacy systems, and with this move to extract data more and more, being able to do that at the edge can kind of create a sort of a central point, at least within the retail store, to share data, to extract data, and to manage that data locally from these legacy systems. And that becomes increasingly difficult to do in the cloud when those legacy systems don't live in the cloud today. They kind of live on premises some of the time. So, what we always get asked is, what are the use cases then in retail? And we'll talk about this, and, it'll be great to hear from the guys as some real life applications that they're already deploying, already seeing that use edge. Some of the ones that, we've been evaluating in some of our research are things like this idea of providing more immersive experiences in the store in particular. And so, at the moment, it's kind of off, maybe happening in the flagship store, but it's things like being able to have some level of augmented reality, so the customer or the visitor can, test new things out, and also have a longer experience in the store as well. So it's also about keeping the individual within the store and obviously getting them to spend more. The other, some other examples of this that we've seen are kind of having augmented reality mirrors, say in a fashion store, where rather than going out to change the clothes, change the color, change the size, whatever it might be, use an augmented reality mirror to be able to do some of that, and as a consumer be able to browse more items in the catalog more quickly. Payment processing, so being able to speed transactions up, some of that online, but also in store, using also, I guess, biometrics in some cases, other means, not just, like it shows here, traditional kind of credit card and cash payments, but being able to use some of those more almost IoT style of payments will require some processing as close to the consumer as possible. We've also seen a few around location-based services. Some of that can be around, I guess, tracking what's happening in the store on a longer term basis, but it can also be more real time. So we've seen use cases in, say, fast food outlets where they're using, a combination of Bluetooth and other technology to be able to track where essentially where the consumer is. If they make an order, they can then go find them in the store without giving them a, kind of a physical device, or doing it in a more manual way, or, checking the table number. So it's all about optimizing the customer experience and taking some of that burden off them. And then one thing that we've seen, I guess, quite recently, and I know I think AugoVision has been looking at this, and Biablu as well, is actually there's been a kind of, I guess, a surgence of sort of edge analytics for helping retailers to comply with various COVID-19 measures. So that can be about monitoring social distancing. It can be about monitoring whether PPE is worn, thermal kind of imaging to check, temperature in store, but doing that in a way that doesn't disrupt the process is key here. And then just to go through the rest quite quickly. So we've got, things around contextual advertising, again, being able to tailor adverts based on, the types of people who are in front of the sign or the advertisement, and optimizing, I guess, the e-commerce experience. One of the big areas, and, I think all the panelists are sort of quite aware of this, is video analytics. And clearly that's a real sweet spot for edge computing, because it combines the real-time nature, combines the need for low latency, but it's also a very kind of high bandwidth application, because you're collecting all that video data, and it doesn't make sense to send to cloud. So that's one I just want to deep dive on. There are, there's sometimes some hesitation when you hear video analytics, and people think it's all about this sort of Big Brother style facial recognition type application for security and surveillance. But there are lots of other use cases within this. So some of it is just other security things more broadly, where rather than detecting people, it's detecting events and just mitigating that. And clearly in retail, they want to reduce the chance of shoplifting and reduce theft kind of more broadly within the store, but also mitigate any problems that might threaten other consumers within the shop. Second thing is all around customer engagement. So, there's various, I guess, IoT sensors that can be used to optimize the experience within the store. But one of the key ones is video, and especially if you want to be able to say, profile the people who are walking past the sign, to be able to do some sort of targeted advertising, contextual advertising, or if it's simply that there is a digital kiosk and you want to personalize what the customer sees based on who they are. And some of that, in some markets we've seen that they are starting to use facial recognition for that, so they may even recognize you as a sort of loyal customer and immediately pop up what you're likely to look for. And then the last two, access control. So I guess, in a back office stock room, there is some need to use some kind of biometric video analysis in some cases to determine whether someone can go in or not, and ensure security in a kind of relatively seamless way, in a more foolproof way. And then the last thing where we've seen, which has been a key video analytics use case in retail for a while, is using video to monitor, to count basically footfall, to look at the types of people going into the store, how they move, and that is increasingly being done at quite a granular level. So really not just being able to say, how many people are visiting the store and when, but specifically which products are they looking at. And there's a compelling business case for retailers where they can potentially charge their suppliers different amounts and provide that data as a kind of a new revenue stream for them, as well as understanding how they can better plan their own stores. So just to, I guess, round off this presentation, again, I guess a key thing is always, why is edge required? And video analytics, I've kind of spoken about some of these already, but there's a real benefit in using edge computing, especially compared to cloud and on device. So, some device manufacturers, video camera manufacturers, are trying to make the device smarter and be able to integrate some of the analytics on the device itself, which, there are some advantages because you can filter some of that video data sooner rather than later. The challenge is that, for some retailers, or almost all retailers, they will have some level of camera real estate already. So it makes sense to avoid having to replace that and actually just leverage what they already have and sort of add the analytics off the camera itself. And, it becomes increasingly expensive to have to replace those over time. The other thing is, the camera itself has limited processing power. And as the number of applications that rely on video analytics increases, and, there's increasing need around using AI and machine learning, that puts a strain on the compute power that's required. And so, a camera may not be able to do that all the time. There are some cases where they're using sort of traditional on-prem. So it's more like you may have an application which runs on a dedicated appliance. Kind of already talked about this. It's obviously not as flexible, as scalable as having an edge compute type infrastructure, which is, where you can change the workloads, where you can move workloads more easily, change the applications that are using that infrastructure in a way, and also scale up and down as, in different times of the day, different times of the year, there'll be more analytics that needs to happen, high season, peak time, that sort of thing. So it makes sense to have something that's relatively scalable. And again, challenges with using the cloud is, in some cases, there's a perceived, sense of that it may not be as reliable, particularly if you're, relying on a wider area network. And also there is that cost of bandwidth where, because the video is, so bandwidth hungry, usually I think a standard camera consumes about 5 megabits per second, and that's on the, kind of on the lower end. If you scale that up, it is quite a lot of bandwidth for especially a small retail branch to have to pay for. So being able to be a bit more sophisticated in how data is filtered, where and how video is transported and stored makes a big difference. And just quickly, in the interest of time, but there's some innovative applications happening. This is a bit of kind of not a very COVID-19 environment friendly one, but this is an application that's being tested. It's being done by this company, DataSpark. They've got a kind of intelligent queuing system for pubs and bars, where, based on, they can use sort of facial recognition to better optimize the queuing system, so people don't get annoyed when, the guy or the girl who's more pushy gets to the front of the queue. But it also does other things like be able to, kind of do ID checks more quickly and that sort of thing. Just a sort of a fun example, but I'm sure we'll hear more from the panelists. So that's a bit of a quick stop tour of, what Edge can do in the retail sector, and hopefully provide food for thought for the panel in a moment. I think what we wanted to do to just tee off the discussion is present with a bit of a poll. And I think a lot of the audience today will be from the telecoms industry. So it's just interesting to know how, to what extent you are serving the retail sector today, not necessarily looking at edge computing specifically, but, what types of, to what extent you see it as, I guess, a key sector, and to what extent you're providing applications and solutions that go beyond connectivity. So just to go through these options, first one is, you're mainly providing connectivity services to the retail sector, and it's probably going to be a highly horizontal approach. It just so happens that retail is one of multiple customer segments that you serve, and there's limited ambition to go beyond that. Second option is that you're providing probably a mixture of connectivity, but also some other horizontal IT type services. It could be contact center, call center, maybe some cloud hosting, other ICT based services. And then the last two are about moving to a more, a more focused approach for retail. So the number three is you have an ambition to provide some, more vertical specific applications and services, but it's kind of, early days for you. And then the last one is, that you're already making a big push into retail. You do have a vertical approach, and you're providing some of these applications and solutions today already. So yeah, just good to gauge sort of where our audience is at in terms of looking at the retail sector. So I think we have got a good spread. Shall we check out the results? Great. So yes, I guess as we can see here, I mean, not many are only doing just sort of standard connectivity service, but I guess there's a bit of clustering around the middle ground. So there are a lot of, I'm assuming, telcos and maybe other kind of technology companies who've gone in the audience today who are, providing some kind of horizontal services. And about half of the audience now is looking at these vertical specific solutions. So I guess that's good for our panel, so we can shed some light on what those specific vertical applications and services look like. And again, the big topic within the discussion is a little bit of how can Edge open up that opportunity or further accelerate it for those who are already providing vertical solutions today. Great. So I guess without further ado, we're moving on to our panel discussion.
Thanks, Dalia. So thanks for that presentation. Thanks for highlighting some of the pain points that the retail industry is facing and some of the potential edge-enabled applications that can help to overcome them. Just a reminder, please do put any questions or comments into the question box should you have them, and we can get to them over the next 30 minutes or so. I can see some interesting ones there already that should be a good discussion for our panel. We're going to move into this panel section of the webinar. So I'd like to invite Jaume and Aji and Kennedy, perhaps in that order, to briefly say hello and introduce themselves, and maybe particularly for Jaume and Aji, introduce a little bit about your company and what you guys do. So get Jaume, over to you to kind of start us off and say hello.
There we go. Sorry for that. So thank you very much for inviting us. So my name is Jaume Portell. I'm based in Barcelona, and we do technology for retailers to improve for them the revenue and the bottom line of their business by sensing customer behavior in their stores by using edge computing. So we sense their customers' presence with Wi-Fi analytics, with computer vision, with people counting, with RFID sensing. So we know what they do, we know where they are, we know how they move around the store, and we finally know what they purchase because we integrate all the ERP data into our solution. So with this, an artificial intelligence engine decides which is the best outcome or value proposition that the store can provide at any given point of time to make customers happier, to make customers purchase more, and to make, of course, the business perform better. So in this case, edge computing is extremely relevant because it's connecting the dots of the technology in the stores, collecting valuable data from any interaction of the customers passing by or entering in the store, and making sense out of it to make that store perform better and serve the customers better. So this is exactly what we do.
Thanks, Jaume. Aji, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chili, and thanks, Dalia, for the presentation. Thanks for inviting myself and AlgoVision to this presentation. Just to give an introduction, my name is Aji Anirudhan. I am based out of Pittsburgh, our US office, and I represent AlgoVision. AlgoVision is a video analytics software product company providing multiple solutions for various verticals. We have a suite of products, we say 40+ features, which covers different video analytics, face recognition, license plate recognition, other applications. To just give a context, there was an article which came up saying that by 2000 there'll be 13 million images will be generated and stored per second by the surveillance cameras deployed worldwide. That's per second. And what we do is, this is our input. So what we do is, how do we build intelligence to each of these input images. So this is created in locations from traffic intersections to airports to malls to retail units to warehouses. So what we do is we apply our algorithm in applications and build real-time intelligence and create metadata. So the real-time intelligence could be used to actually make decisions at the edge, in the shop, or in the mall. And this metadata could be used to actually create reports, understand behavior, look at marketing intelligence, do business intelligence, those kind of data. So what we do from a retail perspective is definitely getting this data out and making decisions in real time. So this could range from actually providing a real-time alert to customer support person to see that there is a customer who's interested in a particular aisle. And with pandemic, there is another angle which is added to it. It is that the bringing customer back to the shop requires new norms like social distancing. How do you establish or maintain a social distancing? How do you enforce somebody wearing PPE? How do you identify there is a crowd which is informed in a particular aisle, and how do we actually manage that? So these are requirements today which is actually restricting people or customers to go back to the shop. So retailers are looking at solutions which build confidence to bring customers back to the shop and to maintain safety and security of the employees. So our solution, which is a suite from face recognition to footfall analytics to heat and flow map, helps some of these applications where it is the safety of the shoppers and the employees are understanding the behavior of the customers, right from how do you actually manage a loyal customer, get a better customer experience through demographic analysis, or identify the traffic flow within a shop so that marketing promotion can be more effective. So just to summarize this, we use the inputs from existing infrastructure, which is surveillance cameras, and run our algorithms. It could be a combination of running algorithm on the edge and smart devices with compute power using GPUs, and which can make real-time decisions, and taking those metadata back to maybe a cloud or an on-prem bigger device to actually get more business intelligence. So that's a value proposition which you bring to retailers. And this could be offered as a service or offered as a licensing model. And what we are seeing more and more, these retail companies are looking at a flexible model where they can actually scale up their operations and have a flexible business model where they could do a monthly subscription fee or a feature-based subscription fee, or maybe a data management-based subscription fee. So we're kind of looking at models which can address these challenging scenarios and provide them solutions which is more intelligent and flexible. That's what I mean.
Thanks, Aji. And lastly, Kennedy, maybe would you mind briefly introducing yourself as well?
Sure. Thanks, Tilly, and thanks, Dalia. Excellent kickoff there. And Harme and Aji, appreciate the insights over there from a retail perspective. I run our worldwide voice transformation practice that comprises of collaboration and contact center at its core. Just a couple months ago, I was responsible for running our retail, restaurant, hospitality, and grocery practice on the West Coast. AT&T's presence in this space is storied. We've interacted within the retail vertical for the last 8 years, and we address now over 90% of the top 100 retailers on the NRF Federation list. From AT&T's perspective, we have a wide variety of operating assets that we bring to bear through our Xandr advertising division, through our Warner Entertainment division, and through our Comco division. Those capabilities all sync together in harmony in order to deliver a differentiated experience both for consumers that visit retail stores as well as for the brands that interact with those consumers. our ethos is within networking. So we always start with the foundational network platform, whether that's wired or whether that's wireline. It depends upon the direction of the enterprise. We align accordingly. In line with that, then we layer on SD-WAN and we layer on FlexWare type of capability, which then brings that firewall, routing, switching to the core. It also brings high degree of availability when you layer on SD-WAN, right? So when that is cared for, all of that underlying connectivity and calibration between the edge and cloud also takes place. And when that underlying capability is established, then we start to look at moving up the value stack. The value stack then becomes applications that can run at the edge. And this is where 5G and edge becomes rather important. So anything sub 5 milliseconds is what's going to be able to lend itself really well to run at the edge. And so commensurate with that, then what does that wireless connectivity need to look like from a 5G perspective? What does that wireline connectivity need to look like from a high availability perspective? When that's defined, then from a north-south capability, data that's flowing that's above 5 milliseconds in terms of workloads are going to go and naturally lend itself either to residing at the network edge or within the cloud. Data that is sub 5 milliseconds, like video intelligence or like digital signage, requires real-time engagement with consumers. Those lend itself really well to run at the edge. And so if you look at the poll earlier, when you start to look at enterprise starting to consider what applications they want to run at the edge, there is a history of technology debt of existing servers that run at that edge today. So the opportunity to institute a single stack from an edge perspective, rationalize all of those individual servers that serve individual use cases, uplift the applications from those individual servers onto containers on the edge, that then starts to deliver really differentiated benefits. You can then address use cases in front of house, dwell time, path to purchase, right? Those analytics will then determine what's selling, what's not, how do you increase additional products within that path to purchase, if you will. And then from a back of house perspective, how do you ensure that there's the right amount of flow of goods within the store based upon affinity of that local demographic base? And when you look at that data that's generated there, suppliers are rather interested in that IoT data so they can understand depletion rates. If they can understand depletion rates, they can drive fulfillment, as Dalia pointed out, in this new normal under the COVID environment with supply chains being constrained. Having access to that level of data becomes rather critical for the suppliers so they can ensure those shelves are stocked. And the same token, that then ensures the brand along with that particular store has uplift on a revenue per square feet basis, as well as the supplier is able to drive their monthly sales targeted to that particular store. So you can see our approach takes into account not just the network stack and the application stack, but we actually go to a use case driven demand based upon what the enterprise is looking for. Tilly?
Thanks, Kennedy. Thanks all for the introductions. And I mean, I guess Dalia mentioned some of the benefits of edge computing and what it can bring to digital applications. Kennedy, you there have highlighted latency as one of those, and it's often front and center of conversations when you talk about edge computing. I guess I'd be interested to understand from a sort of solution provider perspective, so Jalma and Aji, from your perspectives, what it is that edge really unlocks for your applications in particular. So of those low latency and other benefits around data sovereignty and flexibility, you know, what for you is key that edge enables you to do that you couldn't do perhaps with the cloud or a more traditional on-premise solution? Maybe Jalma, you could start us off.
Sure, thank you. So, well, basically, data is the new gold for companies, and the data is generated in the cloud. Likely, if you might like it or not, but sometimes there's no connectivity at the store, or sometimes there's some issues with the connectivity at the store for different reasons. Losing data means losing know-how, losing the reason why things happen. So it's extremely important to collect the data at the edge for that reason, because you want to at least keep it there, and then when you have connectivity, bring it back to the cloud. So having something in the cloud is very relevant, but having independent systems at the edge being able to react by themselves, collect data by themselves, and protect that goal from being lost is extremely relevant. So I would say this is one of the elements that makes all this extremely important for the retailers. No, it's they will end up selling soon the data of their experiences more than products that directly. So retail spaces will be the place where you understand the product, where you enjoy the product when you make the decision, but maybe not where you buy. And they will need to prove this with data. So proving that customers visually engage with it, that customers touch it there, that customers had a conversation about it there, will be their service, their value creation. If you cannot record this in a way that you can prove it happened, then it's you're not proving that you've created value for the brands. No, so I think it's extremely relevant for the future. We need that data, and that data should not be lost. It means that it needs to be created at the edge. If by collecting that data, you can react on that, and you can react in real time and make that experience better for everyone, not only for the for the customer visiting the store, but also for the store owner, for the managers at the store. They also need the intelligence of the store to help them selling more. So you need that response back to the staff in real time as well, and that makes a difference in the experience creation. No? So I would say it's real-time reaction, but it's also keeping the value, the goal that's being created there, proving it, and sending what's relevant. That's not the individual's identities to the cloud. It's how the magic happens in a structured way and secure way.
Nice, and I guess there's a sort of a reliability and resilience angle that you were talking about at the beginning as well, that the edge may be able to provide when you're talking about how important this data is and needing to make sure you've always got access to it at the right time. Aji, is there anything you would add on this front around kind of, for you, what the real key benefit is for running your video analytics solutions at the edge rather than anywhere else? Is there anything you'd add there?
Yeah, so to add to what Jaume said, the real-time intelligence to guide or to actually get better experience for the shoppers is what you do on the edge. This is extremely important for retailers. Say, for example, how do you actually provide somebody a customer service real time based on the reaction or based on the data which is collected in the shop or at the edge. So our solutions, we create multiple metadata, but we actually can apply, okay, what metadata is used to actually make a decision on the spot, where low latency is required because going back to the cloud and coming back is not going to actually help. Like things like if there's a customer service required, or if the behavior is understood, and if the person has to be supported. So, or there's a queue management requirement there, where the people are getting frustrated because the queue is going slow, or things which support service like a parking spot identification, or maybe if it's a restaurant, if there is a table is available. So these are like real-time information which either needs to be provided to the customer or should be used by the retailer. That has to be on the edge. But since we are collecting metadata from each of those videos, which has been analyzed, that could be then used later offline or on the cloud to actually do reporting, create business intelligence, do different slicing and dicing to actually come out with new programs or identify new patterns. So I believe it is a combination, definitely as a hybrid model, but edge requires a lot of attention because the reaction time is less for customers when it comes to identifying a pattern or like the retailers engaging the customer.
Great, thanks, Aji. And Dalia, we're having some questions through, I guess, about terminology or definitions here, because probably everyone on the panel has a slightly different idea of what edge means for them. I wondered if you'd be able to kind of give a sense about, say, the difference between a network edge or a mobile edge computing and an on-premise edge, and maybe, what's most appropriate for the retail sector, just as a kind of a definitional question that we're getting from a few people.
Yeah, good. It is a good question, and I'm sure the guys know that it can be a bit use case dependent, but I guess I mean, broadly speaking, we always talk about two types of edge. So we say the network edge, which could be about putting edge compute infrastructure at points of presence, I guess, physical locations on the telecoms network, so in the 4G or the 5G network, or it could be a fixed network as well. I think at the moment, more of the investment and the emphasis is on mobile edge computing, so putting those points that, on the mobile network, and companies like AT&T and others are looking at that at the moment and deploying some of those sites, and that will be particularly useful for applications where there needs some level of mobility required, or if the device as well is connected on a mobile network. So you do have, for example, fixed cameras which might be connected via SIM in some cases. So there it makes sense to actually maybe use a mobile edge compute rather than something on premise, because that's actually the first, be the closest hop, if you will, to do some level of edge processing. So there's that type of edge compute, which is, I would say, a little bit more nascent. And then you have kind of the on-prem edge compute, where you're putting flexible infrastructure at the customer premises, and here it's a retail store we're talking about. And I guess they can take various forms and guises. It could be a small number of servers. It could be a mini data center, but in a lot of retail locations that's a bit that can be unfeasible. Or it could be IoT gateways. It could even be a network CPU device that's opened up to host third-party applications as well as network services as well. So there's lots of different forms, and depending on how much compute is required, that may determine what type of edge infrastructure there is at the retail store.
Great, thanks. And I don't know if anyone else wanted to jump in and clarify for them what edge means, specifically for their use case or for them, or does that kind of sum up for the rest of the panelists? Has Dalia managed to sum up that definitional question?
Yep, I'll chime in here. So from our perspective, from AT&T's perspective, as I alluded to earlier, anything sub 5 milliseconds is what's going to lend itself to function really well at the retail store edge. So when we talk about video intelligence, right? Being able to have that real-time assessment, and then have that real-time assessment inform the actions of managers or actions of associates becomes rather critical, right? If you look at aggregated data sets, that lends itself really well to the network edge. So if you're running your machine learning models at the store edge, but you're running your deep learning models for clusters of stores in a specific region at the network edge, that lends itself rather well. So obviously use case dependent, right? From an edge perspective too, you have consumers saying, know me, know my preferences. When I enter the store, greet me by my name, understand when I've been here last. For the manager, or for the concierge, what's that average customer lifetime value? What have they? What's their quarter-over-quarter spend or month-over-month spend? Is that increasing or is that decreasing? What have they recently looked at online but haven't bought? What have they bought, and what are the adjacency products that could be added on that could drive that increased basket size, right? It's those kinds of engagement that drives a differentiated consumer experience and keeps them coming back for more. That also powers that revenue acceleration. That's key. Final point, when you start to think about optimization of interactions within the store, whether we're now within COVID and even post-COVID, right? So from COVID perspective, the store is now extended all the way out into the parking lot. That connectivity and all the applications correspondingly need to follow out there. You need that calibration between the app, which is serving as a signaling from the consumer, to the retail store manager or the associates, right? So figuring that out, edge plays a really key part. But even in a post-COVID world, when you start to look at engagements, right? And you start to look at signage that you're going to put in various parts of the mall, that drives the awareness campaign, that brings them into the store. When you start to look at advertising that you're running within that specific metro area, recalibrated, and again on that digital signage, but also with a call to action button, that also becomes important. From a video intelligence perspective, how many people are waiting in line, and at what point does that lead to cart abandonment? And so having that intelligence and analytics inform the manager, as well as that aggregated intelligence informing the director or the VP of store operations to understand where to augment additional resources, so that way they don't see a drop off. How do you split off in a rather acute manner transactions that are only cash driven or only credit card driven versus returns? So you can take that entire returns process and move it to a video interaction in the back of the store. You can have that process automated and even begun at home. So it's looking at it through that lens. That's use case driven. That's going to go drive the outcome. That's where I believe the benefit will lend itself really well.
And Kennedy, just briefly while we're on you, had a question from Ravi Shankar, and I think it's, as we've been discussing these different types of edge, they want to know how infrastructure ready we really are for edge computing. And I don't know if you could touch upon, at least from AT&T's perspective, how what your infrastructure rollout is looking like, and kind of how commercialized, widespread it is.
Indeed. So we're ready for edge today, coupled with 5G, right? And you folks have seen our rollout plan in terms of availability. I'd encourage everyone to visit att.com and look at our mobility network for the latest coverage and availability across the United States. But the point being, the existing technology that within the stores is going to govern your rollout of edge computing, right? The only factor that could potentially change that is if there is a near-term immediate demand for video intelligence, as Aji pointed out, or as Hamid pointed out, and that analytics that come along with it. So then you're going to introduce the edge element into the store. The first use cases that are going to drive it is going to be video intelligence around path to purchase, around customer sentiment, around identifying consumers when they come in, obviously with the requisite opt-in, if you will, with the requisite security, right? Being able to have Wi-Fi bonded with the edge as well. But when you do that, though, when you do that initial deployment of edge, then it becomes a rationalization discussion on when those remaining servers are approaching end of life. And then you start to look at uplifting the applications that run on those servers and running within containers within edge. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Kennedy. And I mean, I guess we have a lovely panel today with a kind of mix of different types of solution providers, an operator, an analyst. And, you know, I would say that to deliver an edge-enabled solution, you're going to need multiple parties like the people on the panel today to work together. So I would be interested to hear a bit about the kind of panel's perspective on how we can cultivate ecosystems of application developers and solution providers and SIs and operators to work together to have those relationships and the right partnerships in place to deliver edge-enabled solutions. And I mean, maybe it'll be interesting to hear Jaume from you first, and then we'll kind of move around and get everyone's opinions before we wrap up.
Yes. Well, first of all, I mean, I think it's clear that there are many a lot of opportunities at the edge already in place with the existing hardware in the stores. The processors taking care of digital signage can do video analytics themselves. They can do Wi-Fi analytics themselves with the right software. So they can become the version 0.1 of the edge computing that's already putting the dots together and making that store smarter. So I think there's already certain level of technology that is today disconnected. An executive of McDonald's said we have 21 different IT systems in one store, and 95% of them don't talk to each other. So having the right software layer in connecting those different systems creates a version 0.1 of the edge computing that can already make the stores way smarter. And when we, any of us sells digital transformation of a store, so with computer vision, people counting, digital signage, all of it connected somehow and creating value, and the ERP systems connected. there's many companies in the ecosystem that make money out of it. Let's say it that way. That share the cake, right? So installations, line, and so connectivity of those stores, the sensors themselves, so the hardware providers for the sensors, Intel with their CPUs at the edge, some hardware manufacturers that are creating these marvelous, edge computing devices like Dell with their PowerEdge servers in the cloud, and then at the edge, and then the cloud guys that are enjoying the fact that we're making more sense out of the data, creating more gold out of it, and sending it to the cloud to create an additional layer of artificial intelligence that can even further extend the intelligence of the system. So each of them is enjoying the value creation. So each of them can participate in this, digital transformation effort. And that's why I think, each of us is engaged in several levels of partnership. We have some telcos reselling our technology in different markets. And the reason why is very clear. They sell additional services together with us, and they share part of our revenue by adding this value. But you know what? They get, they justify all the investments because the customer is generating more revenue and more margin out of doing that digital transformation. So at the end of the year, they say, okay, we've paid this for the technology deployment. We've got this out of an increase in margin. So we're happy of, to hire all these services. And that's the magic of having the ecosystem working together to create value, right? So it's not only the camera, it's not only the communication, is the magic of putting all the pieces together to create value. Then everything pays by itself.
Yeah. So for you, it's clear that there's a piece of this pie for everyone. And also, I guess what you were talking about was the importance of interoperability or being able to bring these different solutions and parts of the value chain together to provide value for one retailer in particular. And Aji, anything that you would add in terms of how everyone can work together within this ecosystem to unlock the value we've been talking about today?
No, I totally agree with Jaume, because this is kind of a partnership or a puzzle, or I think there are multiple components which could be added, because our part is to actually build intelligence to it, and it could be an input to maybe Jaume's system. It could be input to maybe a backend business intelligence or a data analytics system. So we don't see ourselves being an independent unit, because we need to actually have systems which manage storage, systems to actually do data analytics, systems who actually deliver content, and definitely hardware players. So we need to actually bring in the right hardware, either at the edge or in the cloud, to actually provide enough processing. So yes, hardware costs are coming down, especially for artificial intelligence with GPU processing and accelerators. But we still need to have the hardware players like Intel's and NVIDIA's to come with the right configuration, and the suppliers like Dell to actually provide us the right computing power or light form factor to actually address this. And definitely, I'm saying we today, even the current scenario, we work with multiple partners. There are video management system guys, there are access control guys who uses our input to actually define how to actually let a person in or out. There are data analytics guys who take our output to actually create reports and build intelligence to marketing campaigns. And there are data delivery guys like the digital signage. I'm saying based on demographics which we build, and how do we actually create the right advertisements and how that is delivered. So definitely it is an ecosystem who actually delivers what you see when you go in the shop, and it involves multiple partners, and definitely the network and the service provider, which is people like AT&T, who has a bigger role to play here in terms of not only bringing us all together, but also to an extent, I'm seeing even system integration becomes a key element to this, which will be driven by a partner. And again, delivery with respect to how do you actually manage the costing. So that's another important thing. We all need to work together, and there should be a model wherein the customer pays, okay, I will pay you $10 per camera or $10 per service. how do we actually work this together and share that in the back end so that the customer doesn't get taxed for a capex, but we still make our money. So that's important too.
Great, thanks, Aji. I think we're out of time, but what we will do is get Kennedy and Dalia's take on that last question, and also on any of the questions that have been asked that we haven't had time to get to. We will ask we will sort of send out a written Q&A answers to all of those questions we haven't got to today. We'll send that out along with the slides that Dalia presented and a recording of this webinar in the next couple of days, so do look out for that. And that just leaves it to me to say thank you to everyone for joining the webinar today, and thank you to our panelists for taking part. I think we will also be able to share some contact details of our panelists. So should you wish to kind of reach out to anyone who's presented today, that will also be in the follow-up that we send to you. And that's it. Have a great rest of your day, guys, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dalia and Dalia. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys.